When I was very young, I think 8 years old, my father gave me a book of Sholem Aleichem. And Sholem Aleichem was a writer, a Jewish writer, a Jewish humorist, and he described the life of the Jews in the little villages and towns in Russia, in Poland of today, Galicia. And my father was such a boy in one of those little villages near Lvov, near Lemberg. And I felt that he's giving me the key to his childhood, because usually he wouldn't talk about his childhood. But through the book, I think he felt he can give me the key to the childhood. And I started to read, and I was fascinated. It was a reality that I never knew. I mean, I was an Israeli boy in the first years of Israel, a country that built itself after the Shoah, after the Holocaust. A strong country, a country that is tuned to the future, does not want to look back at the atrocity and the horror of the Holocaust. And suddenly there was another melody in these stories. It was a whole world that I believed exists parallel to my life then in Israel. I had no idea that this was the world that was exterminated during the Holocaust. And it was a whole world with its codes and constitutions and characters and a special melody. And I felt he gave me a treasure, really. Because nobody at my age knew about Sholem Aleichem. Nobody knew him. And I read it like today a child will read Harry Potter. You know, it's a magic world. Even I remember the numbers of the pages were not in digits, but in letters, as it is in the Bible or the Talmud. So I thought I got a kind of, some secret that only me and my father know. And I read it. I read the whole book, and I was taken by the reality of the Jews in those shtetl, in those little towns, and how they were afraid of the non-Jews, of the Gentiles. I never met someone who was not Jewish until then. I thought all the world is Jewish. And the life of this little orphan, Motel, who became my hero, and I had identified so much with him. And I think in a very short time, I read all the stories of Sholem Aleichem, that most of them were for grown-ups, but because of the attraction of the childhood of my father, I inhaled all of them. I read them through and through. And I remember there was, when I was 9, the radio, the Israeli radio, was a governmental radio. And he had only one station. And they announced a national competition of knowledge on the writing of Sholem Aleichem. And I told my parents, I want to go, I know Sholem Aleichem. And they laughed at me. They said, come on, you are a kid. I was less than 10. I was 9. So I went and bought the first postcard of my life, and I mailed it to the radio authority as they announced on the radio. A week later came a letter from the radio inviting me to be auditioned. Now, my parents almost fainted. For them, it was, like David Ben-Gurion, the mythological leader, calls me and tells them, give me your son, So my father accompanied me to the audition. And of course, when we entered, they said, no, the boy is out and you stay here. And my father said, no, the boy is the matter here. And they started to ask me questions, and I really knew. I mean, I had a very fresh, good memory of a young child. And then, and this is funny, they said, we have to accept you, but we cannot, because it's not educational that such a young boy will win such a big money prize. It was something like, I think, $100 or something. But Israel of the beginning of the 60s, a very ascetic, also poor country, so they thought it might corrupt me or something. So they said, but we shall allow you to be in the studio while we are broadcasting it. And when one of the competitors will not know the answer, we shall turn to you. And so it was. And each time one of them didn't know, they asked me and I answered. And there were some people there from the radio who suddenly had the idea that here there is a boy, you know, we can use him to make reports and to interview people, and they suggested to me. So at the age of 9, I became a kind of a young correspondent, the only young correspondent in Israel. And I went and interviewed the president and football players and theater players. And in a way, I stayed in the radio for 25 years, and later I did everything. I was the anchorman of the main news magazine, and I had my own programs. But it was so sure how Sholem Aleichem influenced my life, how literature actually changed my life. And I'm indebted to him. Always I will be.